the alleged misuse of government power, not to investigate or prosecute potential acts of terror, but to intimidate and persecute individuals. Individuals like this man who you see here at the airport in Rio de Janeiro, David Miranda, and his spouse, journalist Glenn Greenwald. Tonight, they are speaking out for the first time since Miranda's detention at London's Heathrow Airport on his way home to Brazil. Greenwald, you'll remember, writes for Britain's Guardian newspaper and has been NSA leaker Edward Snowden's conduit to the world. Sunday, Miranda was heading home from Berlin, having met with a documentary filmmaker named Laura Poitras, who has been working with Greenwald on NSA stories. While he was changing planes in London, British authorities detained David Miranda and questioned him for nearly 9 hours under Britain's anti-terrorism law. As you'll hear, though, only on 360, Miranda claims they did not ask him a single question about terrorism. They did, however, threaten him with jail time and confiscate his laptop and memory sticks. And before letting him go, just minutes before the law says they'd have to justify their actions in court. Just a short time ago, for the first time since the incident, I spoke with David Miranda and Glenn Greenwald. David, let's just start with, there's been a lot of misreporting on this. So if you can just take us through what happened. You were on a plane. There was an announcement that everyone had to show their passports. And then what happened?
Well, I walk out, and there was 2 officers just waiting by the door of the plane. And they're just like checking people. They pick up my passport and they look at my name and look at my face and just ask me, "Sir, can you accompany me?" And I went with them. And we went to this room, and there was 4 chairs in there and a table, and they started to ask me questions there. The moment that I got there, they told me that I was under this law, because I asked why I was being held. And they say there was the law, the Terrorism 2000. And I asked what was my rights in that and what do I have to do. They say that I have to answer every question, and if I didn't cooperate with that, I can go to jail.
What kind of things were they asking and saying to you, David?
Well, they asked me all kinds of questions, and they asked me about my relationship with Glenn. They asked me about my relationship with Laura and what I was doing on my trip to Germany, and what I was carrying, everything.
And David, British authorities say that they detained you under, it's called Schedule 7 of the UK Terrorism Act, which allows them to question someone to determine if they are or have been, and I quote, concerned in the commission, preparation, or instigation of acts of terrorism. Did they actually ask you anything about terrorism?
No, they didn't ask me anything about terrorism, not one question about it. And I think it's really weird because I was in there for like 8 hours without talking to anybody outside, and like they're just like keep me. I have to ask them, do I have to answer this? And they just telling me like, if you don't answer this, you're gonna go to jail. And you know that's a big thing, because like when they say like that I was in this under this law, this is terrorism. You know what UK and United States do. They have all the powers in the world to do anything they want with this, because I've been following Glenn and his career for the past like 8 years, and I have seen many stories that people like pick up in the different countries, get into this Guantanamo Island and just like stay in the prison, and they have vanished. Nobody's seen them. So in that moment, I was like really afraid what would happen to me.
Sure.
And you understand that I was for 8 hours without talking to anybody outside of the world. I didn't know what's happening, and they keep threatening me about me going to the jail without law.
And Glenn, you got a call from some British official who wouldn't give you his name, just his identification number. What did that person say was happening with David?
The very first thing that he said to me was that he was detained under the Terrorism Act of 2000, which is an obviously terrorizing thing to hear about the person that you love most in the world and with whom you share your life. And I then asked how long he had been detained. He said he had been detained by that point already 3 hours, which made me know it was much more than a routine secondary screening in immigration. I asked whether I could speak with him or have a lawyer from the Guardian sent in, and they said you cannot speak with him and he does not have the right to have a lawyer present with him. I asked them what their intentions were as far as how long he would be held, and they said they had no idea, and that was all they would tell me.
David, I know you had said that they took a laptop, memory sticks, an external hard drive, your cell phone, and more. Do you know what were stored on those devices? Was there classified material?
I don't know that. I mean, I was just taking those materials back to Glenn. I mean, you know, Glenn been working with a lot of stories along the years. I didn't quite follow everything that he writes every day. I can follow him because I have to have a life. And I mean, I can't know everything that he's been working with.
So David had visited this filmmaker that your reporting partner on the NSA stories, Laura Poitras, and in Berlin. I've read
Yes.
The Guardian had paid for David's flights. Glenn, was he carrying classified material with him?
Well, I'm not going to talk about what he was carrying because that's our work product as journalists. Remember, both Laura and I are working with The Guardian as journalists. What I would say is every single newsroom in the United States, every single major news organization in the world has classified information. Reporting on what governments do in the secret is what journalism is about. So if you want to support the idea that states can just go and confiscate from journalists classified information, you should be demanding that your government go physically into newsrooms and seize whatever classified information is there. All of the best reporting over the last 40 years involves journalists having classified information. The Pentagon Papers, the Bush torture sites, CIA black sites, the illegal warrantless eavesdropping program. That's what investigative journalism is. And if you want to start criminalizing that, it means that you're asking as a citizen to be kept ignorant and to allow people in power to conceal what they're doing behind a wall of secrecy and to have no accountability or transparency. Journalism is not a crime and it is not terrorism.
I would also imagine that any information that David might have had was likely duplicated, backed up someplace else. So confiscating it, it's not like that would make it simply disappear, which then, I guess, leads to your argument that this was to intimidate you and send a message to others.
What they did is ludicrous. First of all, of course we have multiple copies of every single thing that we're working on. Nobody would ever travel with only one copy of anything. Even if you just lose it or it's stolen, that would be inane. Of course we have multiple copies around the world in different places. So taking it is in no way accomplishing anything. Secondly, every single thing that both David and I carry, even personal items, thing for his school, are protected by very advanced and heavy forms of encryption, which they can't access. So taking it doesn't enable them to know what's in there either. It's not going to stop our reporting. It doesn't do them any good. All it did, as I said this week, is give them a huge black eye in the world, make them look thuggish and authoritarian, interfering in the journalism process, creating international incidents with the government of Brazil, which is indignant over what was being done, for no benefit at all to themselves, which is why I said I truly believe they'll come to have regret what they've done, because it's aside from being oppressive and dangerous, it's also quite incompetent and really quite dumb.
We're going to have more of our 360 exclusive interview next, including claims that David Miranda was detained on orders from Washington. More now, my exclusive interview with reporter Glenn Greenwald and his spouse David Miranda, who was detained and questioned for nearly 9 hours under Britain's anti-terrorism laws. Greenwald claims the real purpose was to intimidate him and other journalists, also in light of his stories on the National Security Agency to retaliate. The question is, was the United States involved? Here's what Deputy Press Secretary Josh Earnest said when asked that question.
There was a heads up that was provided by the British government. So this is something that we had an indication was likely to occur, but it's not something that we requested, and it's something that was done specifically by the British law enforcement officials there.
So officially a heads up for Britain, but not a request from America. I asked Glenn Greenwald whether he buys that. Here's what he told me.
I don't have evidence that the U.S. government ordered it, but I'm very disturbed that my own government was aware of this foreign country's intent to detain my partner and did nothing to discourage it or to protect the right of free press guaranteed in the First Amendment of the Constitution, or did anything else to protect the rights that we both have as human beings and that I have as an American and as a journalist. So whether the idea originated with the UK or with the US, clearly the US government was perfectly happy to see this happen.
And David, when you stepped off the plane finally, when you got back to Brazil, what was that like? What was the feeling?
Well, I was relieved. I mean, I was in my country. I knew I was going to be protecting him because I was in my country, and I know that people here would be caring about what this situation, and I was going to see my husband, and we'll be together, and I know he was going to take care of this whole situation.
Glenn, I saw a quote from you saying that you would be, quote, more aggressive, not less, in reporting on England. Some headlines seem to indicate you were going to be acting out of revenge. Is that accurate?
It's completely inaccurate, Anderson. I was asked whether or not the detention of David would deter my reporting and what I thought the outcome would be for the UK government. And what I said was that if they think they're going to deter me in any way from this threatening behavior, they're deluded. It's going to have the opposite effect on me. It's going to embolden me. And the reason it's going to embolden me is because when I see that governments abuse their power, as the UK government did, I realize that they need even more transparency and more accountability. It makes me want to work harder. It makes me want to work faster to inform the world about what it is that they're doing. And when I said I thought they were going to come to regret it, it wasn't because I was going to publish out of vengeance. It was because I knew what they had done was extremely counterproductive to their own interest.
And as far as legal action goes, your lawyer seems to be indicating that you're planning something. Can you say what?
Sure. The lawyers in the UK on behalf of David have filed a lawsuit, and what they're essentially seeking right now is a declaration from the British court that what the British authorities did is illegal, because the only thing they're allowed to detain and question people over is investigations relating to terrorism, and they had nothing to do with terrorism. They went well beyond the scope of the law. And secondly, to order them to return all of the items they stole from David, and to order that they are barred from using them in any way or sharing them with anybody else.
And finally, Glenn, just on another topic, since Edward Snowden has been granted asylum in Russia, can you tell us anything about his life there, how he's doing?
He's doing great. I mean, what he spends most of his time doing, honestly, Anderson, is following the incredibly productive debate that has been triggered all around the world over the dangers of surveillance and the value of internet privacy and freedom that he hoped to trigger. I don't know if he necessarily loves Russia. That would be the first choice that he would pick to live in, but he certainly prefers it to the next 3 decades in a supermax prison in the United States. So I think he's happy to be there given his options.
Glenn Greenwald, David Miranda, thank you guys for talking. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Anderson.
Thank you.